Hello, Giants fans, and welcome to your Valentine's Views podcast for Friday, December 9th. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and subscribe wherever you're listening to us across the Big Blue View Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, we are a couple days away from Giants versus Eagles, week 14. Always a game that gets everybody fired up. Obviously, a big game for the Giants, who will be an underdog this Sunday at MetLife Stadium against the 11-1 juggernaut that is the 2022 Philadelphia Eagles. And here to help me break down this weekend's game on a crossover edition of the podcast today is Brandon Lee Gowton of Bleeding Green Nation. Brandon, how you doing? I see that smile on your face, and you guys, Eagles fans, definitely have a lot to smile about this year.
Yeah, they do. Like you said, they're 11-1, and they're coming off their arguably best win, most complete win over the season. All the talk was, oh, the Titans are going to come in and it's going to be a tough game. They're going to muck it up, take the points. The Titans might not win, but they're definitely going to cover. And the Eagles just beat them thoroughly. So the Eagles are certainly flying high right now.
Well, congratulations. You guys do have a terrific team this year. I think we all knew entering 2022 that the Eagles had loaded up. They had brought in A.J. Brown in the offseason. They had picked up James Bradberry. They made a bunch of other moves. You had a couple of first-round draft picks, I think, if I remember correctly. But we knew that the Eagles would be good. We knew that they would be the favorite in the NFC East. Sorry, Dallas fans. Sorry. Well, not sorry, because I'm never sorry when Dallas loses. But
Same.
anyway, we knew that the Eagles would be good. As you've watched it unfold this year, are you a little bit surprised that it's been this good?
Yes, I am, from the standpoint too of typically, historically, and this is something that Jason Kelsey even really admitted before the season. When the Eagles are expected to be good, they're not. They disappoint more often than not. And when they're expected to be not so good, they tend to overachieve. That was very much the case last year when they ended up getting a wild card spot, coming off, a 11-1 or whatever it was season in 2020, really bad year. And Doug Peterson got fired and everything. Carson Wentz got traded. So a little bit of a different path from the usual script. And certainly, I think you looked at the schedule. Everyone looked at the schedule when it was released, and it's like, man, this is pretty favorable. They're probably going to get to double digit, but everyone's saying like 10, 11, and they're already at 11
Mm-hmm.
to their first 12 games. So certainly that was a surprise. I think there was optimism relatively about Jalen Hurts. How he looked in training camp and everything, but I didn't think I saw a night and day difference from him in practices over the summer. And we're clearly seeing that difference in the real games this season. And, there's a very strong case that he is the MVP at this point. And I don't think even his most optimistic supporters could really say that was a likely outcome. So, yeah, certainly expectations were high. Everyone thought they're going to be good, but I don't think anyone really saw them being 11-1 good.
No, it's funny. Let's talk about Jalen Hurts a little bit, because I think when you look at Eagles surprises, I think that he's the biggest difference maker. I mean, he was the wild card sort of entering the season, and I was thinking about this today. The path that most NFL teams would love to follow, try to follow if they can at all, is get that rookie quarterback, or get that quarterback on his rookie contract, where you've got that 4-year window. If he's a first-round pick who you choose to use the 5th-year option, you've got a 5-year window where that guy is not costing you a heck of a lot of money. In the case of the Eagles, not only do they have that quarterback on the rookie contract, but they have that quarterback on a 2nd-round draft pick rookie contract. So they have that quarterback on an insanely inexpensive contract, which might be a lot of the reason why they've been able to go out and get James Bradberry, and why they've been able to go out and get A.J. Brown, and why they've been able to bring in Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh during the season. So just, I mean, it's amazing to me. Nobody obviously saw this coming from Jalen Hurts. He was drafted in the second round. Nobody thought this was going to happen. And we saw last year that teams were trying to force him to pass the ball, make him run, make the Eagles run, try to, try to stop the run. But what has happened to him this year? I mean, he couldn't keep the job at Alabama, and second round pick. Nobody saw this coming. I mean, you saw some physical ability, but nobody saw this. So what's been the thing? I mean, what are you seeing through these 12 games?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was something that teams should really kick themselves for missing on, from a standpoint of, like, there's not a big precedent for the kind of improvement I think that Jalen Hurts has shown. Everyone wanted to talk about Josh Allen in the offseason, and I was quick to downplay that because of what I just said. I don't think that is the normal path for young quarterbacks. They don't just take this massive MVP kind of leap, especially in year 3. Now,
especially as a second round pick,
right? And also, to me, the book on Josh Allen coming in the NFL, he'd only played like 20 something games or whatever at Wyoming, not even Alabama or Oklahoma, but Wyoming. And also, he was a physical freak. Like he tested off the charts, and not just that, but in terms of height and weight, everything. Where Hurts a little bit shorter, and also had issues passing the ball in college. He wasn't like thought of as this extremely raw prospect that just needed some time. Now, he was very young, and I think something that myself included, people probably didn't give enough weight to, is how much he has it right above the shoulders. Like, he is exactly, and I think a lot of this was said like in the offseason. It was like, if you could just kind of take his mentality and mindset and work ethic and everything and put that in like a more talented body, then you really have something there. But to his credit, I think he's worked extremely hard, maybe even more so. Like, maybe we're talking about, like 99 percentile working hard, because you're seeing it in his improvement. Like, he's gotten better in a lot of different ways in terms of utilizing different parts of the field. I just think, obviously, adding A.J. Brown helps. So certainly the support system, he is one of the best offensive lines in the league. But certainly Jalen Hurts deserves a lot of credit as well. And, a lot of people like to call him or think of him as like a dual threat because of his ability to pass and run. He likes to call himself a triple threat because he obviously factors those in, but his mind as well. And I think there's validity to that in terms of he doesn't really put the ball in harm's way. And I think part of that is knowing what's going on out there and knowing where he can, get away with risking things sometimes, or knowing where to go with the ball, and knowing not to be overly aggressive and make a dumb decision, and really just keeping down those turnovers, while at the same time not being like a check down Charlie, not being Sam Bradford or anything, but being aggressive at times. And honestly, there was just an example of this with the touchdown to A.J. Brown, his second one in the Titans game, where he was so aggressive with it. Like, that was not a really like a read on that was not like one of the progressions on the play. Like, that was not the target to get him the ball. But Jalen Hurts has said to his receivers, like, if I'll be alert on any play, because even if the play is not designed to get to you, like, I might throw it up to you. And certainly, again, that's where the A.J. Brown factor comes in, having a receiver who can help make the quarterback better. But Hurts really just has improved across the board. He's really young. We probably should mention that as well. So, that was always possible that he got better from that standpoint. But he is certainly surprised me.
Yeah, I think he has from this perspective, he has unfortunately surprised everyone. Let me ask you, we talked about some of the offseason acquisitions, and obviously one of those, from the Giants' perspective, one of those, unfortunately, was James Bradberry. And Giants fans can gnash their teeth and complain and whine and moan and groan all they want, but this was a situation that Joe Shane and Brian Daboll were handed when they walked in the door. They had massive salary cap issues, and to move forward, not only to get through 2022, but to set themselves up so that they could have a better long-term future and start to go out and pursue more talent. They had to cut James Bradberry. They had to move on. There was no other choice. There was no other way to spend that, to save that kind of money. And as it is now, they're still pinching pennies to get through this season under the cap. But unfortunately for the Giants, they weren't able to trade Bradberry. He went to the free agent market and he landed in Philly. Obviously, probably the one place that Giants fans would have hoped he wouldn't go is the place that he landed in. And the question for you is, from the numbers, we can see that he's played well. How much of a difference is he making for Philly? And when you look at the offseason acquisitions, A.J. Brown, anyone else that the Eagles brought in, where is he in terms of, where would you rank him among the offseason acquisitions that Philly made?
Yeah, I'd put AJ number one just because that was massive and impacts, the quarterback and the offense and the magnitude. And also I just think he's like a better player. I think he's a legitimate top 5 kind of receiver, at least top 10 in the NFL. Where Bradberry's also very good. And I think around that conversation, at least this year, I mean, he might have a career year. He already has 3 interceptions through 12 games. His career high was 4 last year. There's 5 games left to play, so he might top a high in that. Scored his first defensive touchdown on a pick 6 this year. Might set a career high in passes defense. He's at 14. His previous high was 18. Again, 5 games left to play here. So he's been awesome. He's only allowing a passer rating of 40.0 when targeted.
That's insane.
That's a crazy, it's a crazy number. And I mean, he's been great. I think you can make the case he's been better than Darius Slay, and that's not to put anything down on Darius Slay. I just think, Slay gets all the attention because he's kind of been there more, has more of the hype. But I think Bradberry has been right with him again, if not slightly better. So he's been awesome. I guess you could probably say number 2. It's just such a big deal, to have Darius Slay. Okay, it's a great corner. You're locked in. He had a great season last year, Pro Bowl season, bounced back after a down 2020 year. And then you can just add another Pro Bowl, maybe even all pro kind of level cornerback on the other side from him. That's huge. These are the best Eagles cornerbacks that they've had in a long, long time.
Yeah, it's interesting in terms of Bradberry. What I always thought of Bradberry when he was with the Giants was that he was a good player, maybe a really good player, but I would never put him in the shutdown number 1. He can lock down anybody, kind of that kind of cornerback. I would never put him in that conversation. I saw Terry McLaurin eat him up too many times. I saw him fail to cover guys, number 1 caliber wide receivers. I saw him struggle with in man-to-man situations too many times. I knew he would be good for Philly in that situation with a good defense around him. I didn't see this kind of year coming. I didn't think Bradberry was capable of the kind of numbers he's putting up this season. I just didn't see it.
I think, this isn't everything, but I think it's part of the equation too, is that, yes, in Philly, he doesn't necessarily have to cover the number 1 wide receivers because Darius Slay gets to take those. But, the offenses, move guys around. It's not like he's never facing number 1 wide receivers. And also going back to training camp, there's quite a few reps where James Bradberry had to go up against A.J. Brown, and A.J. Brown was pretty unstoppable for the most part in camp. But out of Slay and Bradberry, I always thought Bradberry had better reps against him and would actually win some of those battles. So I think he's been awesome. I think part of it could be that he was really motivated after getting cut, especially when he did. I understand the Giants' angle to it all. But, his angle is that he's pretty frustrated, I'm sure, that he couldn't get cut sooner to the start of the league year when teams had more money and more needs to spend with. So I think he was motivated to kind of go out there and knowing that this is a contract year for him. And I'm sure he wants to hit the market hard again this offseason.
Brandon, I'm always curious for an outside perspective on the Giants, on the team that I cover, because you get tunneled in on the day-to-day with the team, and you get, you know how it is, you get dug in on how you feel about certain things, and sometimes you forget about the rest of the league and all of that. So I'm always curious for an outside perspective of the Giants. 7-4-1. I think at the beginning of the season, nobody would have seen that coming. A little bit like Philly fans would have thought, 11 wins might be a great season.
Mm.
I think at the beginning of the year, Giants fans might have signed up for 7 or 8 or
Yep.
9 wins as a sign of progress. And, now obviously, rightly or wrongly, expectations have risen a little bit. Just what is your perspective on, from the outside? And you obviously haven't paid attention to them on a day-to-day basis, but just the outside feeling on where you think the Giants are.
Well, that's not true. I go to Big Blue View every day. I do, because I put your articles in our link roundup. But certainly, yeah, I haven't seen every single Giants game. But from the outside looking in, I think so. They were 7-2 before they played Houston and the Lions, right? Or
They were 6-1 at one point, and then then lost to Seattle, so 6-2
okay,
before the bye. 7-2. Yes, so Houston would have been 7-2.
okay,
Right.
okay. So I remember around that time, I'm like, it just feels to me. I said to RJ Ochoa on the NFC's mixtape that I was like, the Giants are going to lose either this Texans game or this Lions game. They're due for a loss. I didn't think it was because they were bad. I just think they had been playing a little bit above their heads. And you look at point differential and DVOA and things like that, and they weren't like in the top 10. They weren't worth where these other teams that have a lot of wins. They're the same similar records were a lot of these one score games. So I didn't think they were, truly among the NFL's elite. So they're like, they're due for some losses here. They're going to probably take some kind of step back. And they did. So I wasn't shocked at the time. I think what I want to give the Giants credit for, certainly, I mean, what Brian Dable and Mike Kafka, what they're getting, like production wise, offensively, out of the very limited and injured talent they have on the offensive side of the ball, I think that's been very impressive. I think the way that Daniel Jones has gone from being like a turnover machine for so early in his career to not really doing that anymore, I think that's very impressive. And I think that speaks to a bigger thing about what's different about this version of the Giants than the Giants of many seasons past now, where they don't really beat themselves as much anymore. They used to do that a lot. I was very
Right. I
and I
I
don't
think I think you make a good point. I think the Giants, you have to beat the Giants now.
right. Yes. Yeah, you can't just hang around and it's all right. Like they're gonna make a mistake. We'll capitalize at some point. It's like no, like they're probably they're gonna hang in. You're gonna make it tough. They're not gonna scare you. They're not gonna like blow you out of the water, but they're gonna hang around. So I think that's the difference this year. Obviously, earlier in the season, I think Saquon was his success, which was certainly talk about things that were unexpected from my end. I thought that was very unexpected for him to bounce back like that. Now, I think he's tailed off a little bit more recently as they've kind of gone on the slide. And I'm sure, you can probably offer better perspective as to why that's happened, but I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, I think that what I have said, and Big Blue View readers and listeners have heard me say this before, have read this from me before. The Giants are what they are. They have a very narrow path.
Mm-hmm.
They have a certain way that they have to play, a certain way that games have to go. And through the first 7 games, they were able to control that for the most part. Their path is run the football, control the clock, control the pace of the game, pass the ball on their terms when they want to pass it, how they want to pass it, use Daniel Jones' legs, keep it a fairly low scoring game, and more or less see what happens in the fourth quarter, see which team makes the mistake in the fourth quarter that ends up, turning the game. And as they've had injuries on the offensive line, as they've had attrition, injuries at wide receiver, Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard, as Kenny Golladay has become more and more and more of an invisible man, it's become harder and harder for them to play offense. And, and I think that's a big part of why they've gone 1-3-1. So, yeah, so that for me is it. I think if you get the Giants into a game where they have to throw 35 or 40 times, that is not their path. They just don't have the wide receivers. They don't have the offensive line to be able to do that yet.
Especially
So
with how injured they are too. I mean, just
yeah, that has been, and people don't really want to look at that, but through the first 7 games of the season when they were 6-1, they started the same offensive line in all 7 games. Since that time, they've started a different offensive line in each game that they've played. And that's a tough way to move the football, tough way to maintain a running game. But back to the Eagles a little bit here. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. When you look at this Eagles team, what I'm going to ask you to do is offer Giants fans a little bit of hope here.
right.
What's the Achilles heel? What is the way, not necessarily to beat this team, but what is the way to give yourself an opportunity to get to the middle of the fourth quarter when it's, one crazy bounce can make the difference in a game? What's the path to get there?
I think it's easier said than done, clearly, but I do think there's a path, and the Commanders really executed that. And that was to play ball control offense, where they consistently. It's funny because there's a lot of talk about the Eagles' run defense struggling in that game. And you look at the box score, and the Commanders only had 3.3 yards per carry. So you wouldn't say oh, the Eagles' run defense is bad looking at that. But the problem was the Eagles weren't creating negative plays in the run game, and the Commanders were consistently getting 3 yards, 3 yards. Okay, now it's 3rd and 4. So they kept getting to 3rd and manageable, 3rd and short, and they kept converting. And now I think that's tough to do time and time again throughout the game, like the Commanders did, which they were 10 for 11 at some point in the first half. It was kind of an insane clip, probably not sustainable, but it's not also impossible to do. So the Eagles' run defense has certainly tightened up, I think, a bit. I mean, they're coming off a really good game of shutting down Derrick Henry, who's pretty good. That being said, they kind of did allow A.J. Dillon to kind of run through them when they played the Packers in a small sample size. So it's not something that's totally necessarily been solved, and it's not like they can't get exposed when it comes to their run defense. But certainly, if I'm going up against the Eagles, especially if I'm a lesser team, like a team that, is going into the game as an underdog, I'm not I don't think this formula is really applies to the Bills or the Chiefs or whoever you want to say, the Cowboys. You're those teams, you want to air it out and all that. But if you're, a team that is entering the game as an underdog, like the Commanders were, I think you want to shorten the amount of opportunities that the Eagles are going to get. And you do that by staying on the field, putting together long drives, which in theory is what Jonathan Gannon, the Eagles defensive coordinator, wants to make other teams do, because he feels like if you make those teams go on those long drives, there's going to be a mistake somewhere. There's going to be a turnover. There's going to be a penalty that sets them behind a schedule, and then they can take advantage of that. But that strategy didn't work against the Commanders. And I think it was very frustrating to see, because I felt okay, Taylor Heineke, specifically, what is he good at? He's probably good at more operating towards the line of scrimmage and throwing short passes, as opposed to he doesn't have the best arm in the world. So maybe you should have challenged him a bit more and made him try to actually air it out and go for the big play. It worked in that matchup. And even then, the Commanders got some lucky, fortunate events in terms of there was a ball that went down to A.J. Brown, and it's kind of wrestled between him and the Commanders' safety. And there was another big play where Jalen Hurts completed a deep pass to Quez Watkins. And if he doesn't really go to the ground for no reason and then get up and then immediately get stripped. So there's some bad luck in there. But I think the ball control offense is the big thing.
That, coincidentally, as we were talking about earlier, that is the way that the Giants want to play. As much as Brian Daboll comes from an offensive background and Mike Kafka does, and they understand what wide open, creative offensive football looks like, the Giants just don't have the people to do that right now. And that sort of ball control, shorten the game, control the clock is the is the way that the Giants want to do things. I did have to say, you did have to go and mention Taylor Heineke. The in that tie game the other day, Taylor Heineke spent the entire second half trying to gift the Giants the football. I watched the All 22 earlier this week, and I watched 4 passes that he threw in the second half that had an opportunity to be game-changing interceptions. And I think the Giants couldn't handle 2 of them. One of them was a juggling, diving kind of thing where it would have been a great interception, and another one was, that defensive back just needed to be 2 inches taller, because the ball went right over his head, right over his outstretched arms. But Heineke does his best to keep you in games. But anyway, I do think that's the path. Although I think, you talk about running the ball control. It sort of helps when you can go out and pick up Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh in the middle of the season.
Sure. And getting Jordan Davis back from injured reserve, that's a big deal too. He only played 6 snaps against the Titans, kind of still being eased back in.
And
But
for me, go
it's not
ahead.
even, it's just not even about those players though. Like,
Mhm.
having them, I mean, that's the obvious thing to think about. It's the impact that being able to trust those guys, like Fletcher Cox is better now because he doesn't have to play. He was playing like 70 snaps a game there after Jordan Davis got hurt, and he's just not built to handle that anymore. You play him, get a snap count down, and he can be real effective in those limited snaps. So I think that's another big part that kind of gets underlooked.
Yeah, this is a little bit where the Giants are in some ways. They have Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence at those 2 defensive tackle spots, and I would argue that as a duo, they're as good as anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But the 2 of them are playing 85 to 90% of the defensive snaps, and that's just hard. That's just really hard to do on a week-to-week basis and to be your best all throughout a game. And that's the Giants just haven't, with the new regime that they've got, they just haven't had time to build that depth yet. So hopefully they'll get there. But hey, before I let you go, we're not going to do the game prediction thing. I sort of asked you about the Achilles heel. I know what you're going to say. I mean, shoot, I'm picking the Eagles. I Big Blue View readers will hate me, but I think as I messaged you, I think if I was putting money on this game, and I'm not, but if I was putting money on this game, I would take the Eagles. I would take the Eagles to cover the spread too.
Wow.
I just would. At 7 points, I would take the Eagles to cover the spread because I think that if the Eagles can put up 30, 34, the Giants haven't visited the 30-point mark since the 4th or 5th game of the 2020 season.
Oh my gosh.
They haven't visited it. It's like another lifetime ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the 3rd or 4th game of the Joe Judge era. They visited it, and they hadn't done it in a couple of years before that. Then they visited it and decided they didn't like it, and they haven't been there again. So if you get to 30, you've got a good chance of covering that 7 points. But what I did want to ask you,
mm-hmm.
Your Eagles are sitting on the sideline of the Odell Beckham World Tour, trying, watching where he's going to end up. What's your take on this whole mess with Beckham? Where should he go? Should anybody sign him at this point? Should teams just wait until next year when they know he's going to be healthy? I mean, is he even worth all this aggravation at this point? I'm curious what your thought on it is.
I mean, definitely not. In terms of at least like if we're talking about a player coming off an ACL injury in mid-February who only really averaged like 13 yards per reception last year. I know the name is big, but this isn't Jerry Rice we're talking about here. Like some of the hype it's a little much.
And it's not the Odell Beckham that Giants fans remember.
Right.
But
I mean, I'm sure he can still contribute if he's healthy, but that's a big question mark. And I don't know what this report is about Mike Florio saying to watch the Eagles. It's interesting. I don't think it's coming out of nowhere. It's coming from somewhere. Is it leverage to kind of maybe convince the Cowboys to offer him a contract? Because it's like, hey, if you don't sign uh, Odell, then he's going to go to Philly. It's tough right now to imagine how he fits into the Eagles because they have Devontae Smith. They have AJ Brown. Those are two number one wide receivers. Quez Watkins has been solid. He's banged up with his shoulder, but he was limited in practice today. I think he'll still be able to play against the Giants. Then they have Zach Pascal, and it's like, is Odell Beckham better than Zach Pascal? Of course, yes, he is. But it's not just about who's better. It's not Madden. Like Zach Pascal is a blocking receiver. He's willing to do that role, and he also plays on special teams. I don't think you're getting Odell Beckham Jr. to play on special teams. So you have to think about role, and even from Odell Beckham Jr. standpoint, like once Dallas Goedert gets healthy, which is he might come back as soon as next week. I mean, the Eagles have a clear top 3 in targets in terms of AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. So he's number 4 at best at that point. So I really don't fully understand how that fits in. I only understand it from a standpoint of, I mean, you've seen Howie Roseman be aggressive here. He went out and got Robert Quinn, and that's really not working out. He just went on IR, but still, he made that move. He signed Sue and Linval Joseph. I mean, that was crazy. I mean, they signed Linval Joseph. It's like, all right, that makes sense. They need a run-stopping defensive tackle, but then they signed Sue as well. It's like, geez, he's really going for it here. In addition to trading for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Bradberry and AJ and all the rest, so he's really going for it. So I wouldn't be surprised from that standpoint, but we'll see.
But Odell can go to Dallas, and then we can both hate the guy.
He would be very, especially even easier to root against him. Yeah, if he went there.
All right. Hey, I appreciate the time. Always good to catch up. Just message Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni to be nice to the Giants this weekend, will you? You can go win the game, but just don't beat us up too bad. We have, in all honesty, probably a more important game coming up the following weekend against the Commanders.
So bizarre. 2 straight games for them against the Giants. The bye in between.
And I don't even mind playing them twice in 3 weeks. They try to jam all the division games in at the end of the year. I get that. But for the Commanders to have a bye in between gives them basically 3 solid weeks to focus on one team.
Yeah, and it's a home game too.
And it's a home game.
So
so that's big time advantage for Washington, but still it is Taylor Heineke.
Well, the Eagles might give the Giants some help potentially in week 18 when they play in Philly, and who knows, what the Eagles will or won't be playing for at that point.
We can cross that bridge when we get to it, obviously, but looking down the road, you're right, because week 18, if that game is meaningful for the Giants to get to the playoffs, reality of it is the Eagles can clinch this week. They're going to clinch either Sunday with a win or they're going to clinch a playoff berth the week after that. The rest of the season for them is really about staying sharp, staying ready, trying to get through it without major injuries, and being ready for the playoffs. So maybe, just maybe, you get to week 18 and you're playing a Philly team that's just trying to cruise through the game and not playing Jalen Hurts and not playing some of the veteran guys. And we can hope for that, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. The Eagles, you guys kind of owe us one after what Doug Peterson did a couple of years ago.
Oh, man.
With the whole third string quarterback debacle.
Hey, that worked out well, I have to say, for the Eagles in the end. I mean, they got Devontae Smith because of him. I'll take that.
It did, and the truth of the matter is, it would have been nice to be NFC East champions. It would have been nice to play in a playoff game, but the Giants did win 6 games. So, they did win 6 games, so it wasn't really much of an accomplishment either way. Anyway, appreciate the time, Brandon. We'll catch up again in a few weeks. Enjoy the game on Sunday. Giants fans, please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.